really just kind of starting with a little bit of the back configuration around note keys and some note configuration. I'll be very brief on that. I think most of the folks on this call are already quite familiar with that. So we'll spend really a majority of our time on the note template configuration piece, sort of the why around that, and then, of course, the note key automation, and then really demonstrating that. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a look. Again, as I said, some of this may be some review. But for those folks that are new, I do want to kind of take a look at this real quick. So from configure, it really all starts at the note keys. Some of these I'm just going to hide. Some of these we actually do not need for the purpose of this demo. But primarily, most of you guys are dealing with assessment and intervention keys. Certainly, if you need to add a new intervention or assessment key, many of you, again, are very familiar with this process, adding an intervention or an assessment. If we just take a look at the assessments, I'll drop here to the bottom. These are the ones that we'll probably primarily be dealing with. So something as simple as assessing, was the goal met? Was the goal not met? Is it not applicable? Is there a refusal? If it is not applicable, do we require a comment? Yes or no, right? So again, some of this is a little bit of review. And then if we drop down to some of our more prominent intervention keys, we've got our verbal, of course, gesture, physical. We've got a refusal, independent, obviously. And then something that came in many years ago by popular request, that was the allowed keys. So again, really just kind of moving again toward audit proofing, ensuring that your documentation is going to be right on the front end, spending less time queuing your notes, hopefully having a system that's working for you rather than against you, right? So this is one we often get a question about, show and dashlet, kind of what does that mean? That really means to include in calculations. So we're talking about the dashboard calculations around percent progress. That will not be the focus of today's training. We're going to be moving quickly. Again, we've got 30 minutes allotted, but you get the idea, right? So this would be for verbal. This essentially means I can enter within the cell or within the mobile anywhere from 0 to 9 prompts for verbal prompting. Same for gesture, same for physical. And then, of course, independent is just, was it independent or was it not, right? That's an X or it was not scored. Same with refusal. And then same idea with the require comments. So hopefully some of that's, mostly review. One other thing to keep in mind, again, with the left to right and the top to bottom, if we're talking about mobile, the left to right sorting of those keys within the grid are handled in the top to bottom. So to control the sort ordering and how that's presented within the interface, within the grid, or within the mobile again, it's simply a drag and drop, right? So like if I need completed to go ahead of, or let's say like time needs to go up here and then it's followed by completed, that's how you do it, right? Left click, drag and drop, that's going to control that sort ordering. So just keep that in mind. If you ever need to make any changes, that's how you can change that visibility. I'm going to move again quickly to note configuration, which is where you are assigning those keys to a particular service. That's typically done here. You may have this in a different place, depending on if you've done any menu setting changes. But it's typically done from billing services, and you should see a note configuration. Again, this audience is primarily security admins, program administrators. So you likely have access to that note configuration. If you don't, we'll talk about at the end some channels you can reach out to, our training support. We can kind of walk you through that. So one of the services I'm going to hone in on today, just doing our demo, it's going to be very brief. Community networking, right? This is a very familiar service code, the H2015 community networking individual. So typically you're setting a default template. Some of you guys on the call may have the auto approved notes enabled for that particular service. Some of you don't. That's entirely fine. Again, if you require a second set of eyes and you are requiring that secondary signature after review, that would not be part of your process. But if you've got the auto approval turned on, that's what that checkbox does. Include supervision signature on note for DMS document. That's going to stamp that supervisor signature if you're requiring that secondary signature. And then here's where we've assigned the keys. So I've already got this set up. These are just the interventions and assessments. And so if I needed to add any other assessments or any other interventions, right, I could do that. So if I needed to add, let's say this is for respite, and it's a simple goal was completed, yes or no, or maybe refusal, then you select it here, and then it's going to show up right up here, right? Hit save. That's going to save your settings. So again, a lot of that mostly review, but that's really where it all starts, right? It starts with the note key configuration, getting all of that configured, and then attaching those keys to particular services within note configuration. And all of that is crucial to the next part of the conversation we're going to have. So without having that set up correctly, you will not be able to proceed with key template configuration. You will not be able to proceed with note key automation, applying that to treatment plans. None of that will work properly unless you get the foundation set first, what we just went through. So, guys, any questions? I feel like, again, that's probably mostly review for you, for the folks on the call. But if you've got any questions around any of that or any nuances, certainly pop it into the chat and we'll take a look at it. If not, let's move quickly. I know we're kind of going to keep this short. We're trying to keep these to, very brief in and out 30-minute sessions. So let's move on to note template configuration. And that, again, is typically found from clients and key rule templates. I started a new template, actually, for this training. So with every template, if I needed to start a brand new template from scratch, you simply click on new template set, okay? And then what you're doing first is you're assigning the service or services that apply, right? So you're defining every time I provide this service or these services, these are the rules that need to apply. And by rules, we're saying, we think of it like triggers. I enter this intervention key and I want this assessment key to auto-populate. based on that intervention entered. Okay, so if I enter an intervention of independent and I score that as an X, then I would want the goal to be marked as met. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So if we go over here again to this new template that I started, I just set this to be applicable to our community networking because that's what we're going to demo. This certainly could apply to multiple services. If you look at the standard rules template in here, this applies to a whole bunch of different services, right? So key here, add it in, give it a description, and then link up the services that it applies to. And then the next thing is you're actually setting the rules, right? So you're defining sort of if-thens, right? If I enter this, then this happens. So a few that I've already plugged in. I plugged in independent, not applicable, and refused. So independent, let me just kind of describe this. If you're not as familiar, if you're a little newer to OnTarget, which I know we've got some folks on the call in that boat, I would say independent equals an X, right, on the grid or again on the mobile. I'm going to demo the mobile with this as well. So independent, when I score that with an X or met, then I want the assessment to also score as goal met. Not applicable, I would want the same to score on the assessment side. Refusal, if I score that, then obviously I don't want that goal to be scored as met. All of this, of course, is going to feed into your efficiency. It's going to feed into making things a lot easier for your staff, right? The less they're having to think about it, the more they can focus on the client, the more they can focus on the care of the client, and less worry about the documentation piece. So I did save a couple that I do want to just kind of go through and actually add. This is one I think that can trip people up a lot. That's really kind of why I want to show this. Verbal prompting is huge, right? Verbal prompting in the IDD space is a biggie for sure. So typically with verbal prompting, you guys are certainly aware if you've seen plans, if you've written plans, if you've been a care coordinator, QP, you certainly seen your share of plans, but they're all written with criteria, right? So Johnny will meet this goal with 2 verbal prompts or less 90% of the time, right, for 6 consecutive months. That might be an example. So based on the criteria within that particular goal, you're setting up the interventions and how the assessment should then behave, how it should then score. So the example would be, all right, let's plug in verbal, right? So this is where people can get a little bit tripped up, and I will go ahead and throw this out there from a development standpoint from our team. We've heard some feedback around this. There are some changes, I believe, that are coming down the pipe to make some of this easier and to make this a little less confusing. But I do want to kind of show you the current build. So a lot of you are familiar. Again, this may be some review, but it's not always a bad thing. So let's say that the verbal would be less than, right? So verbal less than or equal to, and again, let's go with that example of 2 verbal prompts or less, right? If Johnny meets that with 2 verbal prompts or less, then he's met it. That should score as a goal met. Now, here's the thing that's really cool about this. If you're not familiar with this, if you're kind of new to this, you do not have to enter a value here on the template on the intervention side. And that's great because goals are individual, they're client specific, right? So I can go ahead and save this. And then I'm going to go ahead, and this is what's crucial. This is the crucial piece of making this work. And I think this is where things get lost a little bit sometimes. We want the other side of that transaction, right? So again, same example. Johnny's going to do this goal with 2 verbal prompts or less, and that means he meets it. But if we go over the 2 verbal, if we hit 3 or more, then he's not going to meet it, right? So verbal in this case would be a greater than or equal to, right? And same idea here. I can leave that blank, which is wonderful because when I show you in the next step, when we start applying this template, it's going to be specific to the goal, right? So here we go. We're going to move quickly. So let's make sure we got this set up. Verbal less than or equal to is going to mean the goal is met. Verbal greater than or equal to, again, based on however the criteria is written for that particular goal, the goal will not be met. We've exceeded that threshold. Okay, and then final step, save it. All right. I'm going to keep moving, guys, and I promise you I'm going to save a little bit of time for some questions for anybody that has any questions. And you certainly, I'm going to connect you with our training support email if any questions pop up after this session. So I know we're all crunched for time. All right, so let's take a look at Johnny Cool. So his sister Susie, let's take a look at Johnny Cool. We go down to treatment, and let's look at his most current treatment plan, right? Here's our 2025 treatment plans running for the whole year. And if I expand this, I've got my long-term goal, I've got my short-term goals. They are all applicable to the setting of the community networking, right? So this is a community-based activity or event. First goal, Johnny's going to perform volunteer tasks at the food bank 3 times a week or as needed, 3 verbal prompts or less. The second goal being he's going to volunteer at the pet shelter the other 2 days. So he's doing a lot of community networking. So you have a couple of options here. You've got the description, you've got your we call these again, these are the outcomes or short-term goals, right? All of this works with grid nodes. So you have a couple of options down here. This is where we apply the key rules. This is kind of where the magic happens. So key rule, I could certainly laboriously click add, and I could say every single time, independent equals X, goal met, and X, and I could hit update, okay? And I could do that 6 times. I could do that without the benefit of that key template. But the whole point is that, short answer, why are we using key templates? Why are we taking that time to set that up? Because of efficiency. Because it's going to speed this up much, much more than doing that one by one. So what I want to do, I'm going to actually apply that template that I just finished setting up for community networking, that new template. So if I click on add from template, right, everything's pulling in, but I've left the values for the verbal open so that I can add them in based on the criteria written within the goal. So the goal is written 3 or less verbal prompts. So goal met, I would want to say, well, that's 3, right? That's going to be 3 or less than or equal to. I know that can be a little bit confusing. And then I want to get my split point. This is where if you don't get this right, things can get messed up. But as long as you get this correct, right? And again, it just happens to be based on the way this goal is written and the criteria. So 3 or less would mean goal is met. Anything over that, so 4 or greater, verbal prompt is greater than or equal to 4, the goal is not going to be met. All right, I'm going to save it. And I'm going to do the same over here. This is also 3 or less verbal prompts. Just keep it simple. And I'm going to do the same here. Goal is going to be met if it's a 3. If it's a 4 or greater, Johnny did not meet that goal. All right, guys. Moving quickly. I know we got about 5 more minutes. We may run a little bit over, but let's just kind of move quick. So I want to demonstrate this. I want to go ahead and add a note in. So I'm going to start a note within the desktop, but then I want to actually launch and finish up this note within the mobile. Okay. So we've had a lot of buzz around our mobile app. I just want you to kind of see what that looks like from the mobile perspective. So I'm just going to simply, this is not even a scheduled service. So I'm just going to add note. I'm going to find Johnny Cool. And let's say this is today. And let's say that we did our community networking individual. And this work was done from 8 to 10 this morning. We went out into the community. So of course, you guys are familiar with grid nodes within the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and save that goal. Save that note rather. And this is where that automation happens. If you haven't seen this, many of you have, but again, if you've not seen this, if you set those rules up, and again, notice if I scroll over, it's showing me what I can and cannot put into those cells. So real simple, let's say, Johnny had a great day. He did this independently. That's an X. Boom. That's where the magic happens. The goal met, automatically scored. So you're taking that guesswork out of it for your staff. It's going to automatically score that assessment. That's all going to fold over into your percentages. It's going to lessen your time having to review the notes and QP the notes and all of that good stuff, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So we know we've got that note saved. All right. And then real quick, I'm just going to stop my share. And I do want to go ahead and kind of show you the mobile side of things. All right. So if I go ahead and launch on target on my mobile, I'm getting ready to share my screen, I promise. It's taking a little bit of time here, guys. All right, perfect. All right, you should be able to see my screen. And here we go. Here's our mobile app. And let's go ahead and get plugged in here. And again, just want to kind of close the loop here, let you see what this looks like. Again, this was not a scheduled thing, but we do have a note. And sure enough, there it is. Johnny Cool, that's that 8 to 10. I get the opportunity to continue that note. You can see where I've got my green check mark because I completed goal number 1. But I want you to see this again from the mobile perspective. Again, it's just another way of doing it. The more that you can get your staff using the mobile, that is always going to be a great thing. They've got these devices with them, I'm sure, all the time attached to their hip. So let's set this to 2 verbal prompts. And if you check this out right here at the bottom, check out what just happened. The goal was marked as met automatically. I did not have to do anything there. I just simply put a 2, right? I had to prompt Johnny 2 times on that goal at the pet shelter. Get the opportunity for comments, of course, if I need to, and then I'm just going to mark that goal as complete. And then there you go. Goal 1, goal 2 have been done. And then, of course, for the rest of this, I would simply continue on and sign my note, do all of that good stuff, everything else that you guys are likely already familiar with.